Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Minerals Institute webinar series. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Turrbal and Jagera people, and their custodianship of the land on which I'm presenting today. On behalf of the Sustainable Minerals Institute, I pay our respects to their ancestors and descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise the valuable contributions to Australian and global society. For those that don't know me, my name is Daniel Franks, and I'm a professor here at the University of Queensland Sustainable Minerals Institute, where I lead the Development Minerals Program. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Supporting Socio-Economic Development and Resilience in Latin America, the case study of SMI-ICE-Chile, delivered by Dr. Doug Aitken. Doug is a leader of the sustainability area at SMI-ICE-Chile, developing and leading research projects focusing on innovation in the mining industry. His areas of specialisation include sustainable bioenergy pathways, life cycle analysis, water resource management, risk and opportunity analysis, and strategy development. Over the next 40 minutes or so, Doug will outline the industrial and social challenges related to the mineral sector in Chile and Latin America, and show how the SMI-ICE-Chile and the university is contributing to local socioeconomic development and resilience through a series of case studies, project examples, and reflections. As ever, you can submit questions at any time during the presentation via the Q&A button or function at the bottom right of your screen. And I'll then put those questions to Doug at the end of the presentation. So, Doug, over to you, and welcome to the webinar series.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Daniel. Okay. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the presentation. I hope you're all doing well. So when I gave a presentation at the SMI webinar series last year, I lamented the fact that we couldn't be in the same room, and I suggested that it might be possible next year. I got that completely wrong, and here we are still on Zoom. And so those pisco sours that I have pending with many of you in the audience are just going to have to wait a little longer. But we will get there eventually, and it'll be worth the wait. So I'm just going to share my screen just now. Okay, so I hope you can all see that. Okay, so what I want to talk about in this presentation is socioeconomic development and resilience in Latin America, and how we're trying to support that through the UQ and SMI Center that we have in Chile. So what I'm going to cover in the presentation is the following: a bit of background to the center and why we're here, then some introduction to the local context in Latin America, particularly Chile, to provide some background and set the scene for the rest of the presentation. I then want to look at some specific themes related to resilience and sustainability. And what I want to do is present how we're addressing those themes through the work that we're doing at the Centre here in Chile and with our colleagues at the University of Queensland. I'd then like to finish off mentioning some new opportunities and some final reflections. So I hadn't realized the webinar was going to be in the SMI webinar series format, so I prepared a 60-minute presentation, found out last night I had 40 minutes. So I've made some cuts, and we'll see if it's been enough. I may have to end up skipping a few bits here and there, but we'll see how we go. And it's completely my fault for not checking in advance. So it's quite a Chile-centric presentation because we're based in Santiago, and it's where the vast majority of our projects are. But we do have a few other projects and initiatives in other countries, and we're very interested to work more throughout the region. So we're also very interested to work with more research groups and departments within UQ and outside of UQ. So if you're listening and you're from a different department, institute, or organization that perhaps doesn't have a connection with the center or the region, but you are interested in opportunities, please reach out and we can discuss. Okay. So for those who are less aware of who we are and what we do, and given that this webinar is also part of the UQ Research Week, that might be the case. So I want to give a brief introduction to the Centre and our evolution. Be very brief, but do get in contact if you want to know more about the Centre. The centre effectively acts as a mini SMI in Latin America, where we're working towards a mining sector that contributes to global sustainability and also the long-term social, economic and environmental development of mining territories. We aim to challenge and support the mining industry to generate the greatest value for society, minimizing adverse impacts and becoming a leader for positive change. We're currently working through 6 research lines and developing 4 research programs. The structure of the centre has been fairly dynamic as we've evolved and as we work out how best to address the priority needs of the industry and society in the region. And we've established excellent teams across each of these areas that connect with the different centres in Brisbane. So the centre officially opened in 2017 with thanks to financial support from the Chilean government and support from the SMI and University of Queensland. Here are a few photos from the opening with David and Neville here, barely aged at all since then, the two of them. They're there with the mining minister and the Australian ambassador at the time. So it was the start of something special. We started with just 6 people, plenty of potential and a rather hard and painful road ahead, which we started on in a resolute and determined fashion. So thanks to the support of many colleagues at the SMI and EQ, we managed to build up our profile in the region, generate numerous industry-funded projects, presented most of the major conferences, published papers together, and work on many of the challenges facing the region. Sadly, the pandemic put a halt to the flow of researchers to and from Chile and Australia, but obviously we kept in contact and actually ended up generating more opportunities in the past couple of years than we had previously. And of course, we're greatly looking forward to seeing all of our colleagues and friends again as soon as possible, both here and in Australia. So we're now 22 people in the centre, 16 researchers, and we've completed 22 projects. We have 11 projects currently in execution across the various research lines, and we believe we've developed a platform in the region that will support numerous future opportunities for the Institute and the university. We've also developed extensive connections across the private and public sectors, working on projects with most of the large-scale mining companies and organizations in the region, collaborating with the major universities in Chile and numerous other research centers, NGOs, international universities, ministries, and embassies. So I want to briefly talk a bit about the local context to provide some background to subsequent themes, but due to a bit of a shortage of time, I'm going to just hit a few key points. So economically, the region has had a fairly mixed couple of decades, which has also been considerably impacted by the pandemic, although we are starting to see some recovery. The economic situation pre-pandemic also led to unrest across various countries in the region, and Chile was one of those hotspots in 2019, which I'm sure many of you saw on the news. Finally, the general discontent in the country with the situation led to the approval of the development of a new constitution in Chile aimed at addressing the critical issues facing the country. So the country is currently going through that process, and I think there's a general feeling of calm and renewed optimism. Moreover, the minerals markets have been fairly buoyant despite the pandemic, particularly for those minerals that are important to the region, copper and lithium specifically. Here's how the copper price has been varying over the past decade and where we are at the moment here, which has managed to stabilize the Chilean economy somewhat, despite the impacts of the pandemic. Nevertheless, the region is suffering from a lot of challenges, environmental issues, record high temperatures, forest fires, extended droughts, extreme rainfall events, also issues, as you've probably seen, with mine waste impacts and failures. The last 3 of these topics are of particular concern to industry and society in Chile. The mining zones, the operations, and the communities in these zones are in the middle of all of these changes and challenges. And we'll look at how we're addressing these challenges through the various project case studies that I'm going to present. And we'll take a look around the central zones, some of the central north and the northern zones of Chile throughout this presentation. And these are various photos that have been taken from recent site visits. So here are the three themes that I want to consider. Mining and the preservation of natural resources, supporting community development and resilience in mining zones, and integrated and long-term planning for sustainable futures. So I'm going to use one or two case studies for each topic. So the level of detail will be relatively light, but as mentioned, if you want to know more about a particular project or any other project we have in the center, please do get in touch. So we're going to kick off with mining and the preservation of natural resources. So the question I want to ask is, how can we collaborate and share resources to maximize value and minimize adverse impacts? The image I've used here is a desalination plant. So there's been a significant recent shift on the Pacific coast, and particularly in Chile, in investment in desalination plants to address the extended droughts and the low water availability that we've been experiencing in many of the northern and also the central zones of Chile that have been hampering economic development, the mining industry, and also affecting local ecosystems. But despite these new water sources, there's still a lack of coordination between the water users, the water suppliers, to effectively manage existing freshwater resources and also these new resources. So we're going to start in the region of Atacama here, which is an important mining region for the country and the world, and also famously one of the driest areas of the world. So the project that we're going to look at is achieving socio-economic development in arid zones through smart water supply systems. As mentioned, one of the issues that we have regionally is a general lack of connection between water resources and infrastructure, and a limited coordination between water users and suppliers. And as I mentioned, we're seeing increasing investment in desalination plants, particularly by the mining industry, and often in the same areas of the coastline for separate mine operations. And often that water is going to the same areas of the Cordillera. So there's clearly an opportunity to rethink this situation and develop more integrated systems, which are represented on the right-hand side, that would allow water users to share multiple sources and the conveyance and storage infrastructure to minimize pressure on any one single source, increase reliability of the system, and reduce costs and environmental impacts. So this is a concept we started working on several years ago, modeling possible interconnection options between desalination plants and mines in the Antofagasta region of Chile with the mining council, Consejo Minero. We decided following the project that there are a lack of tools to demonstrate to water users, local government and water suppliers what potential there is to connect infrastructure in these sorts of areas. So we decided we wanted to address that. So we teamed up with Mitsubishi Inversiones. That's the investment arm of the Mitsubishi Corporation in Latin America. MCI are financing a 3-year project with us to design and develop spatial water supply planning tools that combine local, social, geographical, and hydrological characteristics with user water supply preferences and optimization algorithms to present the optimal water supply system to the user based on their demands, the sharing opportunities that exist, local constraints, costs of the systems, and environmental impacts. So we're currently developing 2 tools. One simplified planning tool that will be available through a project website. This simplified tool will have a relatively limited capacity in terms of supply and demand options, and it'll provide more generalized results using an easy-to-use graphical interface. So this is just a few shots of what we're developing so far for this tool. It'll be used mainly for educational purposes and to present the general concept that we're proposing through the project. And then we'll be developing a more sophisticated tool that we'll be working on in the coming 2 years of the project, which will be more spatially accurate. It'll provide more supply and demand options, and it'll provide more detailed results. That's going to be aimed at water users, water supply companies, the mining industry, agriculture, and also governmental decision makers. We're currently developing the tools for the Atacama region because it's an area where there's an important mix of copper, gold, lithium mining, there's agriculture, there are communities, there are cities, and there's a limit of freshwater resources and various new desalination developments. The project team at the moment, so this is it here, it includes 7 researchers based out of the SMI and the University of Queensland in Brisbane. There are 6 researchers and support staff at SMI-ICE-Chile. And we're working with local researchers at local university, Universidad del Desarrollo, and the University of Antofagasta. As the project develops, the team continues to expand, and now we're looking at developing partnerships with the Water Management Law Center of the Catholic University of Chile locally as well. We're also going through a process of stakeholder engagement to generate awareness, receive feedback, and create a network of project partners across multiple sectors, both in the region of interest, Atacama, and also nationally as well. Until now, the reaction has been extremely positive from all of the groups that have been involved due to the need for water management solutions, particularly in that area. We've already been asked by some groups if they can start implementing some of the tools in certain areas. We're not quite at that level yet, but it's great to see that interest in the concept and the tools. So right now we're coming to the end of the first year of the project. We're compiling the results into a report, which we'll be making available if you're interested. And we're preparing for the next stage of the project, which will take us a step closer to having the tools completed and hopefully eventually implemented in the region to support long-term resource sharing and increased resilience. We hope when we have the tools ready that we can also partner with other organizations and adapt the tools to other areas in Chile and potentially elsewhere in the region. So now I want to move on, and I want to touch on one of the most contentious topics regarding mineral resource extraction and impacts, and that's the tailings challenge that the industry faces. It's been a considerable problem in the continent, as many of you will have seen some of the unfortunate incidents that occurred in the past decade in Brazil. The industry continues to produce enormous amounts of waste material. There has been quite significant improvement in terms of awareness and evaluation of risks, but the practice of producing tailings continues. So what can we do about that? So the project I want to present is the solar tailings transformation, which is a concept led by the SMI-ICE-Chile and currently going through the proof of concept stage thanks to financing from Expanded BHP Tailings Challenge. It's a concept that is focused on the tailings challenges of Latin America, particularly focused on combining concentrated solar energy potential and fresh tailings to treat the tailings and recover valuable outputs. So we're working on this project with partners in Spain, Censo, Aguasol, and the Madrid Institute, IMDIA. The concept that we're working on was inspired through volcanic eruptions and the process that takes place where molten lava and ash combine to produce lapilli, so volcanic hailstones. It's a pellet-like material that's been used in construction for thousands of years. So we thought it may be possible to replicate this process using concentrated solar energy to transform the tailings material. recover water that's embedded within the tailings, and also generate materials that can be used for local socio-economic development. Here's a very simple process diagram of what we're applying together with our project partners, with each process driven by concentrated solar energy. First, the evaporation and condensation stage, and then followed by a thermal transformation of the material to inert pellets. We are currently testing the concept with our project partners, using tailings material and simulated conditions to analyze the performance of the material through the different processes and to identify the optimal conditions for processing. Application of the process would avoid generation of the typical tailings material, thereby reducing risks. The greatest byproduct would actually be water, which could be recovered for processing or for local uses. The second greatest volume would be the stable pellets, which could be used for construction, road building, or landscaping locally. And also there would be some amount of waste heat that could also be used locally, and several other perhaps more valuable materials such as ceramics, and there'd also be the possibility for recovering some of the minerals prior to the thermal treatment. So one of the main drivers for this project is the potential not only for removing the risk associated with conventional tailings, but generating local social value and impact that could support new opportunities and new markets across different sectors, also supporting socio-economic development and increased local resilience. So we're hoping to be able to present the results shortly and hopefully progressing with the concept. So now I want to move on to specific community-based projects and the topic of community development and resilience in mining zones. One of the major issues in Latin America around mineral resource extraction is the lack of timely communication between the industry and communities, and the limited efforts to understand the perspectives and the needs of local communities. And this dynamic has resulted in numerous conflicts within the region, wasted resources, and also a lack of development in many of these zones. So how can we support collaboration instead of conflict? I would like to begin in the Salar de Atacama. So this is an extremely complex area that has high concentrations of lithium in the brines, and as a result is the most important lithium extraction site in Chile. It has a very diverse ecosystem, and there are 18 indigenous communities located around the salt flats. There are two operations currently extracting lithium from the salar, and as you can imagine, there are numerous challenges associated with this situation. So we've been working with one of these companies to evaluate and provide recommendations for an agreement that they've developed and implemented together with local communities that's aimed at sharing a proportion of the wealth generated from the lithium extraction process, and also to support the development of the communities. So our team developed a methodology to analyze the agreement and provide recommendations based on the work of Kieran O'Farkley at Griffith University and Sally Babbage at the University of Queensland. The team collected the necessary data for the analysis through documentation and also with interviews with the local Indigenous communities. They then organized the data considering 7 different dimensions here developed specifically for Indigenous community agreements, and they applied a ranking or a scale to each of the dimensions based on the results of the data obtained to identify if the agreement is supporting community development and achieving supplying the needs and interests of the communities or not. So this work was carried out in collaboration with the company and with the communities to ensure transparency and to allow the two sectors to work together on improving the current agreement and generating a relationship that will benefit both parties and also the local environment. So some of the results of the project showed a high level of performance in terms of environmental management, where the company works with the community in environmental monitoring. So they've got monitoring programs, and the communities have independent access to the environmental management systems and the information generated. Also, the financial support provided by the companies to the communities was found to be one of the highest compared to other cases in the region and globally. And a percentage of that financing also goes to the research and development program of the local community council. There were areas for improvement focused on strengthening the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to enhance the impacts of the agreement, and also ensuring the compliance of all of the signatory parties of the agreement as well. It was also felt that the company could take a greater role in implementation of the agreement, bringing other local actors into dialogue they're having, and allocate more provisions for local business development and employment and training for the Indigenous populations. So there are areas to improve, but this sort of agreement between the industry and communities is a positive step towards improved collaboration and avoidance of conflict. The next topic I want to consider is the impact of climate change in the region and how we can increase community resilience against those impacts. So we're going to go to the very far north of Chile, to the region of Tarapacá, where we're working currently with a Swiss company, EBP, through their local group, EBP Chile, with the Australian renewable energy company, Power Ledger, and a local community engagement company, Ser Patrimonio. We're working on a number of different projects with different Indigenous communities in the Cordillera in the area to support them in adapting their infrastructure to climate change and increasing their resilience. So I've got a short video here. It's the text is in Spanish. But for those non-Spanish speakers, you'll get the gist, I'm sure, and I'll explain a little bit more afterwards. And it's also an opportunity to learn a few new Spanish words. So I'm just going to play that. It's very short. So the project is called Kuskaya, which means together in the local language, and it's focused on 3 programs: renewable energy, water management, and waste management. In the energy program, the team are developing solar energy peer-to-peer sharing systems to optimize availability and demand across community networks. In water, there's a focus on developing integrated supply and demand management networks. And in waste, we're looking at the opportunities to develop organic waste anaerobic digestion bioreactors. So using organic waste to produce fertilizer and biogas. There we go. In our centre, we're mainly focusing on developing a water management solution for one of the local communities, which is Makaya, this one here. It's a small community that is reliant upon local agriculture and tourism, as they have thermal baths in the community. But the area has extremely limited local water resources that appear to be reducing as precipitation has decreased according to the community members, considerably over the past few decades. Within the community and the valley, so these are photos from a recent trip we made to the site, they have various local water supplies, mainly from small springs and wells, and there's a lot of transportation and storage infrastructure, piping, canals, concrete tanks, but there's very little understanding of the system dynamics. What's the availability from each of the sources, how it varies over time, where it's getting used, when it's getting used, and how that demand is changing over time. So without this sort of information, it's really difficult to effectively manage the resources that they have and ensure that they have sufficient for their basic needs and also for the irrigation of the crops. They are pretty frugal with the resource that they have at the moment, but they have had situations where they've run out completely of water. And current climatic trends in the region suggest the precipitation rates will likely continue to decline over the next few decades. So we ran some workshops with the communities and we discussed the situation and decided a management plan based on a deep understanding of the current system would be a good start to developing a more resilient water system. So what we're planning to do is to design and install a network of flow sensors across the current system to generate data regarding the water supply and also water demand dynamics that will allow us to develop a model of the system and identify where there may be opportunities to optimize, to connect different sources, to better use the storage that they have, identify where there are losses, where water is being used inefficiently. And it might also be interesting to set up some sort of local water market system. So that's the main project that we'll be working on, but it's also likely to be working with some of the other communities on similar projects, but also around water quality monitoring. Water quality is a significant issue in the area as well. And we'll be working on designing and installing a test anaerobic digestion bioreactor to convert some of the community waste to biogas and fertilizer. So that's actually an area that I happen to have a bit of background on, and so does one of our colleagues at SMI-ICE-Chile committee. So it's really a fascinating area to be working in, an area that's really in need of new and innovative solutions to deliver long-term resilience. So the final topic that I'd like to cover is integrated long-term planning for sustainable futures. So with so much uncertainty that we're currently facing socially and environmentally, politically, how can we plan in mining zones for a more sustainable future? The example that I want to present is a project that we undertook with Codelco's El Teniente operation. Quite a few who are listening may have seen some of this project previously or may even have been involved. I did notice some names in the participant list who were part of this project, and thank you for your participation in it. So this is with El Teniente. It's one of the world's largest and most productive underground mine operations with 3,000 kilometers of tunnels. That is about the distance from Brisbane to Melbourne and almost back again. And it produces 140, or it has a throughput, of 140,000 tons of ore per day. It's situated just south of Santiago, and it is really a fascinating place. We worked with the tailings and water team on the development of a long-term integrated water and tailings management strategy using scenario analysis to address future challenges and opportunities in the catchment. So the mine's located here in the eastern mountainous part of the region. This is the old mining town of Seoul, which is now a World Heritage Site. And the operation takes water from the mountains up here. Much of it is retained in the mine tailings, which is transported through this canal system to the tailings dam down here. It's quite an amazing system that they have set up. The operation, however, is facing numerous challenges with respect to its management of tailings and water due to local scarcity, competition with other water users, the impact of the tailings facility, and also the number of potential opportunities that exist to collaborate with other actors in the catchment. So just to give you a better idea of the landscape and the infrastructure, here are a few more photos that we took on our site visit. This is the water extraction site. This is the town of Seoul. This is the football stadium that was financed by Codelco. It's also where we had one of our workshops, and this is the processing plant here. So what we did in this project is we went through a series of workshops and activities with 13 different operational areas of El Teniente, together with researchers from SMI-ICE-Chile, from SMI in UQ, to identify and analyze the challenges and opportunities in the operation and the catchment. We developed an analysis of local trends and national trends based on the PESTEL model. We then constructed, in collaboration with the team at El Teniente, a set of future scenarios. Based on the trends that we analyzed. We then worked on developing a vision for the future of the operation, produced a set of strategic objectives, and then a series of research and action programs to achieve those objectives. So the project included 10 researchers based in Brisbane who traveled over to work with us from the different SMI centers, which provided an incredible breadth and depth of expertise to support the project. And we greatly appreciate their involvement. So the workshops are extremely participative and inclusive. We used card games combined with scientific evidence and group dynamics to construct the 3 different scenarios that we looked at. We characterized and analyzed the scenarios. We developed future newspaper headlines to work out the vision for the operation based on the input from managers and junior staff. And we had very inspiring presentations on the most up-to-date research on specific topics from our colleagues from UQ. Here's Anna Littleboy and Glenn Corder discussing strategic planning and the circular economy. We developed research posters for each of the areas that we suggested for them to develop to achieve their long-term vision. And we undertook a mini conference to present those and receive feedback. And finally, we developed a roadmap with the results, which sets out the process we recommended with information about each of the research programs in a timeline. So it was a fantastic and very captivating process, which allowed the team to consider the best, worst, and most expected future scenarios, what outcomes those might have for the operation and the region. And it allowed interaction between multiple departments to analyze those challenges and think about a shared vision for the future. And the programs that we suggested encouraged integration with external stakeholders in the catchment to find synergies and ensure the benefits of the operation are far-reaching. So I think we all learned a lot from developing that roadmap, and it hopefully sets the operation on a pathway to a more sustainable and resilient future with respect to their water and tailings management. I just want to finish off the presentation by mentioning where we're going and what new areas we're looking to open up, alongside some of the ones that I've already presented. So we don't just want to work in Chile through the center here. We're looking to work in other countries and tackle new problems. So we do have a new project in the Caribbean islands of Colombia to support renewable energy communities. Sadly, we haven't been able to visit those islands yet, but it's certainly on our activity list for the next year. We've also been working on a project in Peru for value recovery from mine waste. And these are just a couple of examples. but we're looking out to open up many more within the region, and also look at opportunities in new areas such as critical metals, energy efficiency and emissions mitigation, application of the circular economy principles to the mining industry in mining zones, monitoring of environmental and human health, supply chain traceability and impact management, and also developing preventative health and safety cultures. We're also very interested in working not just with our colleagues at the SMI, but also with other departments at the university. All of these problems, challenges, and opportunities are highly complex and require multidisciplinary teams to address them. So we're very open to working with other areas. And I just want to finish off with a few reflections. So in Latin America, there is enormous natural resource wealth that can support socio-economic development. I've mentioned mostly Chile, but if we consider the other countries locally, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, there's huge potential, but only if these resources are managed responsibly. There are a lot of threats to development in the local environment, political, industrial, short-termism in these sectors, a lack of coordination and connection between the different sectors, the impacts of climate change. The future certainly doesn't look easy. But there are solutions to these challenges around collaborative planning and good resource management, new tech innovations and rethinking traditional processes, collaborative identification of issues, dialogue between sectors, and the development of collaborative local solutions. So I hope I've been able to show what we're trying to do in Chile and how we're trying to help develop these solutions to these challenges. And that is one of our principal aims through the center here in Chile. But we also want to serve as a platform for collaboration and for change for the Institute, for the university, and for any other external partners who are interested to collaborate with us on developing these solutions and contributing to long-term positive change in the region. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Doug. Very much appreciated. Excellent presentation and wide-ranging. We have a fairly good number of people that have joined us today as well. So I encourage you to send us some of your questions. We have 2 questions and a comment already in the Q&A box and chat box. The first is, maybe I'll put both of the questions to you, Doug, and then you can answer those. If we have time after that, we could then address any others that come in at the moment. So the first is from Sally Babbage, who works here at the University of Queensland and is an anthropologist. She's asking about the constitutional rewriting process that's currently going on and that you mentioned earlier in your presentation, and the potential to shift Chile's environmental legislation, water legislation, and the operation of the mining industry. She writes that as she understands it, many proposals of better regulation and protection of ecological and social life, which are explicitly opposed to sustainable development, come from elected members of the constituente of the northern regions. And she asks, how do you /SMI, how do the mining industry actors see these proposals playing out? So that's the first question. And the second question is from Wendy Terrell. She's asking about the renewable energy and water projects where you're looking to share infrastructure between companies, communities, and other sectors. Can you give a bit more detail on what you see as the barriers, the primary barriers to the integration of that sharing of infrastructure? She's interested in the social and political as much as the technical barriers. So I'll hand those questions off to you to answer. And then if others come in and we've got time, we'll address those as well.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much for the questions. Thank you, Sally, for that first one. That's a very well-informed question. So let me just have a look at it. So many proposals, better regulation and protection of ecological and social life. So opposed to sustaining development, I assume there's kind of economic development. How do we see those proposals playing out? Well, certainly from my focus is mainly around water management, and water resources and protection of water resources has certainly been one of the focal points of the constitutional discussion. What looks likely to happen is that water is going to be prioritized for, first of all, drinking water, domestic use, agriculture, and then followed by industrial use. So that looks very likely to happen. That's actually something that's been discussed for some time in Chile, but it looks like it might be enacted through the constitution, which would probably have an impact on the mining sector. But perhaps not that much, because at the moment the mining sector, as I mentioned, is moving towards the use of desalination plants for their water resources. So that's probably a change that might move a little bit quicker if those changes do get enacted within the constitution. But it may not have that large an impact to the industry, other than those kind of smaller scale mine sites that are very reliant upon freshwater resources and maybe don't have the resources to invest in desalination plants themselves. But then that's also one of the reasons why we thought it's very important that we design tools that show how it might be possible to share those resources between different users, particularly those users that perhaps don't have the resources to invest in new water resource infrastructure and systems themselves. So that was a very water-focused answer to your question, but I hope that at least answers part of the question.
It segues well to your next question as well, which is about the primary barriers of that integration of water infrastructure. What's coming out of that research that is kind of currently limiting those opportunities to integrate?
Yeah. Okay. So through that project, we've done quite a few workshops with different sectors, with the mining sector, with agricultural sector, and with the public sector. Interestingly, they were all very open to the idea of sharing resources, and particularly between the sectors. You know, they said it's not something that happens that much at the moment. But then when we started to get into a little bit more detail, there was a little bit of friction. We didn't have these workshops together for this reason, because we thought there might be a bit of friction between these different sectors, really based around trust. So communities and the public sector perhaps not trusting that much in whether the mining industry would be willing to work together with them in joint infrastructure projects, and vice versa with the mining sector towards the public sector as well. And also there's a little bit of feeling perhaps in the mining sector that communities would kind of ask for more and more resources if it started. So there's certainly different areas that we need to work on there. There's also a bit of asymmetry in terms of the resources that these different sectors have to invest in shared systems. So, the agricultural sector, for example, said, okay, like the concept is fantastic, but, we wouldn't be able to put in the economic resources that perhaps mining can to develop a shared system. So how would that work? Would that mean that the other sector, the mining sector, for example, gets more resources as a result? So, there are various different bits and pieces that look like they might cause some issues against the implementation of the concept. But certainly what we found was that in general, each of the different sectors were quite interested to give it a try and look at new opportunities.
Fantastic. We have a couple of comments. The first was from Lucia, who was asking if she can get a link to the video that you presented because Zoom sometimes it's a bit jittery, so some slides are a bit fast to read on for the Spanish. Another comment from Dr. Diana Abeles Ruiz, who is a member of the Development Minerals team. She's a Colombian and has a network of social experts, including in Las Islas in Colombia, and she'd be willing to connect you with those networks if you're looking for experienced collaborators there. A question from David Fleming, and I think this will be our last question of the day. He asks, for these various projects that you presented today, are there external steering committees? And if so, how involved is the Chilean government in these committees?
Okay, so I mentioned at the start that the center that we have in Chile is partially funded by the Chilean government through Corfo, which is the economic agency for economic development. The projects that we develop through the center are mostly, they are partially financed by Corfo, and we present the projects to this agency for their approval or not. And yes, they can have some input in how the projects are developed, but it's largely left up to us to plan out the projects together with our industrial partners. So some involvement, but not in every aspect. And actually, I should mention that our funding initially came from Corfo. We're now working with another new agency, which is part of the Science Ministry, which is called ANID. So that's our new government partner.
And over time, the ratio of Corfo funding to external industry funding is changing, and that Corfo funding is tapering off. And now a lot of the projects you're doing are planned to be in the future just directly funded. Is that correct?
That's right. So yes, we're currently finishing our second stage of funding from the government. We have one final stage to move through, but yes, the financing tapers off, and the model is towards self-sustaining model, which I think we're getting there.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, for a great presentation this evening, your time. Thank you for everyone online for joining us. Next month, the SMI webinar is on the 12th of October at 9 a.m. Brisbane time. And Associate Professor Mansour Edraki from the Centre for Mine Land Rehabilitation will be presenting on the findings of his research project on scaling up leaching tests for soil salinity predictions. More information and registration details will follow on the SMI website. Have a good day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.